Okay, so let's just start, rewind. Welcome, everybody. We are interviewing Ryan Fenn, also known as Tango Lad. He's joining us from where he is over on the other side of the Pacific, and he is releasing a new book, a very technical book on the T-72, and it is being sold by the Military History Group, which is basically Bernard and Chris's little book publishing company. Someone should stop the torrents. Yeah, it's weird. Um, so, I'll after your first rehearsal there, Ryan, why did you decide to write such a technical book on the T-72? And in fact, even before that, since you've been running the Tankolad or Tankograd website, why on earth is a Malaysian writing so much about Soviet stuff?
It's a hobby. Um, that's pretty much it. I have no connection with any military institution. I just like tanks. I think a lot of people can relate to that. But
Oh
why I
God.
decided to writing about it instead of just reading about it, um, question I haven't been able to answer to myself satisfactorily. Uh, I guess it's just because the stuff that's online is kind of not that good. So I wanted to basically fill in the gaps. Like if you read the Wikipedia articles on a lot of tags right now, it's still not 100%. And that's pretty much the first thing anyone would go to for free online content. Well, I a blog is free, so that was the main what would you call it? That was the main entry point, I suppose. Uh, there wasn't any entrance fee to becoming your own author, so that's how I went in. And I just started writing based on better online sources, I should say. By that time, I still hadn't really invested in any books, so I'm not really doing such a great job at researching from uh, the best Russian sources. So I'm still looking at online articles, but it's just better ones from basically from the Russian internet. And then from there, I started expanding the scope of my research a bit more and also learning more. And after 10 years this year, it's gotten to a point where, yeah, I can write a book. So I know enough about the subject, in my opinion, that I can write something that gives value to everyone else, that you actually have to pay for instead of, just free articles on some blog. Um, that's basically it.
So, I mean, one of the things that struck me is the level of research that seems to have gone into this T-72 book. I mean, you're picking up reports from the Federal Republic of Germany, from obviously the old Soviet bloc. There are American reports. I mean, you're thinking like, oh, this was the average height of a Soviet man in this era, and this was the height that the tank was designed for. I mean, where did you actually do any traveling, or did you just order the books to come to you, or how did you actually do this all?
That's the amazing thing about the internet, Nick. Those reports are all online. I got them from people like Stefan Koch. He's on TechNet. I think you've run into him a couple of
I have,
times.
yeah.
And yeah, so I just talked to these people. I emailed them, and everyone can do this. You can just look up your favorite, forum personalities and email them, and they'll probably respond and they'll share things with you. It's a nice community. So that's how I got a lot of my info. And no, the amazing thing about this book is that it's written entirely in Malaysia. I didn't leave the country to write it. No.
Hmm. Okay, so it was. Took me. Let me see how many pages this was. This was 500 pages almost, 490 pages. This is not a lightweight book. You print it out, you can use it for hand-to-hand combat, and I'm looking at the references. They're all in freaking Cyrillic. Uh, you spent. You said you were working on this one book for nearly 10 years.
No, no, no. The blog was founded, I guess, 2014.
Okay.
But I've been writing in general since for 10 years. Yeah.
Okay, so why did you decide T72 specifically?
Oh, that wasn't really my choice. It was Bernard. Yeah.
Yeah, the video's gonna come and go. When I see it vanish, I'll try to reset it. See if that did it or not. Okay, there we go. Yeah. Okay. Yay, technical joys. Okay, so the book starts off obviously. It's I would have to describe it as a technical book more than a history book, shall we say? So you really decided to go for the nitty gritty and a little less of the how and why. Was there a reason for that, or was that simply a factor of what information was available?
Um, well, there are a couple of actually both of the ones you brought up uh, have had heavy factor contributions to that. First of all, I don't like history. Kind of, I mean, all the content we see on YouTube, it, a lot of the reason why it's engaging is because it's a storyteller doing a great job telling a story. But personally, I can't write stories. It just and the process of writing history or any stories, it's just kind of boring to me, I find. I'm really more interested in the technology of tanks. Yeah, I suppose that's how you could say it. And why I've decided to get into such detail is because I think you've seen this meme on Twitter before about the overlap between content creators on YouTube and what they're specializing in. So like you are specializing in history and it's more credible, right? The more credible side of history. Others are doing entertainment. So I, well, to myself, I'm really cognizant of the fact that I don't really have anything to offer because, I'm not an archive digger, uh, and I don't like writing about history. So what else can I, what else can I give? So I'm on that lower right corner of that spectrum. I have to give, what is it? Uh, what is it? Skills, something like that. I have to provide. Mm, yeah, let
Legitimacy.
me
You're
let me look
talking
it up.
about reliability.
No, no, I have to provide. I'm not gonna go look for it, but basically, I have to provide some kind of value, based on what I know. Uh, what I know basically is just technology. So I to do something original, I'm doing things that I notice other people aren't doing, and that's actually examining type technology
So what does this
like that
what does
50.
this T72 book then do that no other T72 book does? I mean, if I've got already
Yeah,
a book on my shelf about a T72, why would I add yours?
it's a it's that thing you brought up just now. The 50th percentile of Soviet tankers in 1966, something like that. Like people will say the T-72 can fit someone only if they're 5'6", and then in another video, someone will say 5'9". Uh, it's it's a claim that gets spread around. No one knows what the real number is, and no one knows what the context of the number is. So I went ahead to research what exactly is the height limit. And basically, to explain that, you have to get into the ergonomics as a concept, right? What is a 50th percentile? What is a 95th percentile? Why is there a limit? Does the limit actually exist? You've actually been in T72, and I haven't.
Yeah.
I think you've mentioned before that you can actually fit inside. The commander station is, it's
Yeah, you got lots of legroom.
as I recall, yeah, it's acceptable, even though
2 meters
sorry,
tall
you're
almost.
1.9.
198.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is amazing. Uh, so how do you explain that? Well, to explain that, you not only have to go through the ergonomics tank, you have to think about the layout of the tank. You have the whole side of the turret to yourself. That's why you can stretch legs. If you have a gun in front of you, you can't do that. So to explain that, you not only have to go through how ergonomics is designed, what are the ramifications of having that autoloader, right? So everything is interlinked, really.
Because you got like 20
One
pages, I
thing
think,
leads to
or
another.
18 pages simply on anthropomorphics, on the scientific Soviet man, and the dimensions from like the hip bone to the to the knee bone, how
Yeah,
much room they have, and that was what the tank was developed for. And I mean, I don't think I've ever seen 20 pages on human factors, even in a U.S. test report.
yeah. So people would say, look, I watch the same content as everyone else on YouTube, and when I watch people jump into a T-72 or any tank, like I've watched almost every one of your Inside Chieftain's Hatch episodes. When I see people jump into tanks, and they would say, "Yeah, this feels okay. Uh, I could use a bit more shoulder room, or my left leg has to bend a bit inwards." Like, what does that mean, right? When you design a tank, you actually have uh, a set of dimensions. You have to follow that because in the design process, you have a mannequin. You have that reference. That reference for the Soviets was a 50th percentile man, or in other words, an average man. So they had to design the tank to fit that man.
Right.
So what does it mean when you feel like you need a bit more shoulder room? Well, that's because you might be 90th percentile in your shoulders, but you can't fit ideally, right? But you can still fit. So even though a tank is designed for an average man, it can still fit much bigger people. When people say the T-72 was designed for 5'6", that does not mean that you can't go inside if you aren't 5'6". It just means that you might feel in a few specific dimensions.
Yeah,
So,
one
and
of the
when
figures
you
I
read
saw
that
there was
table,
that the average person, there's only 0.05% of people actually are average. Because average isn't just height,
yeah,
it's also width and breadth. And you mentioned somebody might have more torso and less leg, or more leg and less torso. So by designing to 50 percentile, it's actually in reality it's only really truly comfortable for maybe 25%, and you can go too small as well. The pedals might be too far away for somebody particularly short and what have you. And you contrast that. You have
exactly.
measurements in your book. What was the 5th to 95th percentile in the Soviet Union, Federal Republic of Germany, and USA at the same era, wherever you got those figures.
Yeah, exactly. So, and well, there's concept of ergonomics is very very broad. So how do you fit people who have realistic body proportions? The only way to do that really is to make your seats adjustable. And if you're in a car, you can pull the steering wheel a bit closer to you. If you're a bit short or tall, I just the fact that the equipment has to be bolted down to the tank. You can't really pull it forwards or backwards. You can just move your seat. But that plays into the concept as well. What is the ergonomics concept? In public transport, like in planes or in buses, you can't do anything. It's a bench. Um, and if you're in a plane, your priority is uh, cutting costs. So you're not too interested in giving everyone the leg room that someone, for for example, like you might deserve, you have two cramped people, even though there's plenty of headroom, you know, the room above your head to the luggage racks, you've got plenty of room there, but you can't use it. You have to, you have to cram the seats close together out of necessity. In a tank, you can you can only do so much, mostly in width and in length. Like you're not going to see excess height in a lot of tanks. In the tanks that do have it, it's a mistake basically. Uh, in most tanks, they design according to the limits of the width and length. And if the layout doesn't support it, then if you got this gunner sitting in front of the commander, and your turret ring isn't wide enough for them to be completely apart, well, then you're gonna have the commander straddling the gunner. That's really unavoidable.
Fair. Okay, so let's delve a little bit more. I mean, let's say it's like the first chapter is ergonomics, which is it's a surprising place to start. But on the other hand, it makes a lot of sense because that was a planning factor when designing the bloody thing in the first place. So yes, there was a set of ergonomics from the start. Just that set of ergonomics isn't what maybe I would have wanted. But something else I caught up is that you stated that the T72 is a design, shall we say, derived from the T64. Now, I'd always viewed T64 and T80 to be one branch of design, and T72 and T90 to be an entirely parallel branch of design. So to see that the one was sort of devolved from the other raised my eyebrow a little bit. I always thought they looked kind of similar simply because it's a case of form following function. Can you expand on that a little bit there?
Yeah, form following function. That's it basically. That's that's what I wanted to get across. Um, Even for the Soviets, people usually think hard factor, so armor, gun, and mobility. The fact is that everyone, everyone on the planet designed their tanks, first of all, to fit the crew. It's unavoidable because when you design a tank, the first thing you have to do is you set out the gross dimensions, the width, the height, and the length. And then you think about fitting the components inside. And one of the components, I would argue, is the key component, although some people do not agree with that. One of them is the crew. You have to fit them. And in the Soviet tank design textbooks that they would teach at the I forgot what the university is called. It's a technical university, and people who graduate from that university go on to be officers and engineers in design bureaus. One of the tenets is that, or sorry, it's not a tenet. It's a guideline. Is that the width of a tank is fundamentally limited by the width of the fighting compartment, not by the engine, not by the gun, and through the gun the turret ring. No, it's by the fighting compartment. It's about fitting the crew inside. If the crew doesn't fit, the tank is too small. Everyone saw it that way. Why I decided to start the book with a chapter on ergonomics is to show the fact that that's how the tank was designed. The fact that it was spawned off the T64 is, I don't think this is controversial. It's a deep modification of the T64A. It's not a parallel development in a meaningful sense. I don't think, because it takes components from I forgot what it's called, the T72B, something like that. The object 167. It was an attempt by the Ural Vagon Zavod, or I should say, no, it's the design bureau behind that factory, UKBTM. Yeah, it was their attempt to provide an alternative to the T64. You could argue that is a parallel development. I don't think it is, because when you inherit some parts from a different the you're not really turning the tank into a parallel development. You're just taking parts from a different program. Uh, a lot of tanks do this, you know. Usually when you have prototypes preceding a serial tank, a lot of items from the prototypes end up in production. So it's you know, it's not a big deal. It's normal basically. It's just normal.
So T72 is often considered to be the low end in the high-low mix. So T64A was a high-end, high-tech, all singing, all dancing tank, and T72 is by reputation the low-end, yeah, everyman tank that just does the job. Yet, your book, you describe it as actually T72 as an attempt to improve in some respects on T64. So can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. The fundamental problem with answering questions like that is it's really, really hard to determine with certainty what the intent was behind something. Because in the Soviet Union, tech design, it, it wasn't really a military affair, it was civilian. A lot of people are surprised by this, but uh, in the US, I think the design of the M48, M60, all these tanks, okay, they were done by Chrysler, I think. So you would, you know, naturally you would think Chrysler, a private corporation, designed the tank, and then the military adopted it. But actually, the military directly supervised the design of the tank. It was done by the military using Chrysler resources. In the Soviet Union, the design bureaus were basically they were organized under the Ministry of Military Industry, not under the Ministry of Defense. It was a separate, you know, it was a separate enterprise, and they were basically civilian. So when people, you know, uh, when you think about that, there are a lot of ramifications about it. Uh, for one, the tech designers they like to do things according to the way they see it, right? So they look at international trends, they get info from the military apparatus, and they see all these foreign developments and they try to beat those developments. They want to be on top of the world. You know, they're not trying to make something cheap and, you know, expendable. Not at all. Not there wasn't a single Soviet tank design that was meant to be cheap and expendable. They were always meant to be, you know, the best that they could possibly be, given the limitations of the national industry. That was that is a recurring theme. Every tanker research from the USSR, that was the stated goal. Now, what the chief designer really intended with the T-72 is, well, I won't say it with 100% certainty, but I'm very, very certain that he wasn't trying to make a worse T-64. In his memoirs and in other publications by the corporation, the UK UVZ, Urabaganzavod, um, they do not paint the process of designing the T-72 as an attempt to make the tank cheaper than the T-64. They were definitely trying to beat it according to what they've put out. Now, the only reason I can't say that with 100% certainty is because the archives are closed to the public. You can't go in and just research the T-72. In fact, there's very little on the T-72 that you can get outside of those archives. So I can't read off a piece of paper and say this is why they designed the T-72. Like you could with your post yesterday about why they fit the M3 gun in the Sherman. Like it's black and white. That is why they did it for anti-tank work, right? I can't really say that for the T-72, but if anyone asks, I will insist. No, they did not want to make a cheaper, expendable tank. They never wanted to do that with any tank.
Okay. The baseline tank that the Soviets were designing against was M60. Now I know you have a video up already with Bernard on the requirement for the 125 to defeat the M60 because that was the big bogeyman. Was Were other tanks such as Chieftain also taken in consideration, or was it really just they only cared about the M60 and if Chieftain was tougher, so be it?
Oh, they cared about the chieftain, but the reason I brought up the M60 in the book and in the video with Bernard is because that was the reference thread for the D81 main gun on the chieftain. Uh, because at that time it was thought to be the most heavily armored tank in NATO, and this is a very big, this is a very big factor. And the main rival was viewed as the U.S., not the U.K. or third fiddle to the U.S. and to West Germany, which that's not incorrect. Um, so, what tank would be present in large numbers in Europe that could rival our tanks? Well, it's the M60. It's got a lot of armor. It's got a powerful gun, and it's gonna saturate Europe. And it might even be adopted in wide numbers like the M47, which was sent to Greece, Turkey, even, everywhere. Everyone had them. So they thought the next tank to saturate Europe might be the M60. The Chieftain, they were aware of it, but they thought that it was weighing 45 tons. They didn't think it was going to have much armor. So it wasn't the reference thread.
Oops.
Yeah. We all know how that turned out. In the late 60s, yeah, they realized, okay, it's got more armor than we thought it had. But it was still not stronger than the M60's armor. It was basically on par. So in the end, choosing the M60 as a reference thread, it was an okay decision. It wasn't, it didn't it allowed the tank to have a gun that was essentially as powerful as the Rheinmetall 120 millimeter, except a decade early.
One of the things that kind of surprised me a little bit about the gun, when you went into the technical specifications, you talk about the disconnect or the tolerance limit between the sight and the gun at being half a mil. So the gun has to be within a half mil of the sight before it fires. Now, if you think about it, at 2 kilometers, that is a circle, a whole meter in radius, even before you get into the dispersion of the gun and the ammunition. I mean, that's just purely on the sight, which strikes me as being a very large number. Do you have any idea what as a basis for comparison where that number sits compared to other tanks, either Soviet or the rest of the world? Or do you just put the number in the
It's
book for our knowledge and we can draw our own conclusions?
it's I think if you look through the book, you can find what the alignment error is between the gun and the night. So that's what you get if you have mechanical rod linking your gun to your sight, right? Uh, 0.5 mils between the primary sight and the gun is actually really normal. Uh, in the Abrams, for example, I think I've brought this up in your Discord server before. It's literally half of that. It's 0.25 mils. That's still a big circle, but you know, uh, you're not adding that circle to your other technical errors that will contribute to systemic dispersion. That's just the circle that the gun must be in relative to the sight. In practice, it's a lot better aligned than 0.5 mils because, well, it's very easy to find out because if it wasn't, then you wouldn't hit anything. Yeah, that's basically it.
So you and speaking of guns and ammo, so the other thing that everybody loves to talk about is the ammunition stowage and just how likely the tank is to blow up. And I think the way you put it was the carousel ammunition was designed with safety in mind, but the ammunition in the rest of the tank was not.
So there was a point of penny wise, pound foolish, I think. Uh, in his memoirs, the chief designer, that was his stated goal. He wanted a low profile carousel, so you could move freely between the turret and the driver's compartment. Whether you can actually do that is a different matter entirely. Uh, he also he also didn't like the feeling of having this wall of steel separating the driver from the fighting compartment. So basically he just didn't like the basket type of autoloader on the T64. There are a lot of merits to that autoloader, the T64 type, because it is demonstrably mathematically more optimal from a uh, capacity to volume metric. You can fit more rounds within the same diameter constraint just because of how the charges are laid out. But for more or less, I would say intuition, I guess, or maybe they have some internal analysis. They decided that a low profile carousel was better for various purposes. What was the killer purpose, the killer factor? I don't know. I don't know what that is. Evidently, they didn't really care that much about protecting the ammo. The priority, first of all, was the army wanted a certain number of rounds. No less than so and so rounds. To fit that amount in T72, you basically have to put them everywhere you can find a space. So on top of the carousel, behind the seats, everywhere. In the end, the survivability benefit to having that low profile carousel, it's not, you know, it's not really that high. You have to remove a lot of ammo and just keep the ammo in the carousel if you want to enjoy those benefits.
On the operational side, there's another statement in your book there along the lines of the T-72 commander needed to be much more technically trained than the commander of a T-54, 55. But in terms of actually operating the tank, there wasn't any practical difference. Can you expand on why that is?
Yeah. How do I put this? Well, as someone who isn't a tanker, um, it's difficult to explain, but think about World War II gunnery compared to gunnery in an M1 Abrams, the most modern types. Nowadays, you need to learn where the lace button is, and how to turn on the stabilizer. You have to learn a bunch of knobs and switches to set the thermal sight so the contrast is just right. But the process itself is much simpler than World War II gunnery. You have to do less estimation. You need less finesse. You just point and shoot. Basically, that's what it was. You've automated a lot of the difficult things away with technology. You have to be more technically educated to know what the technology is, how to press, which buttons to press, how to load the autoloader. You don't just pass the rounds to the loader and he puts into the racks. Anyone can do that. With an autoloader, you have to know which buttons to press to bring up the tray, and then you put the rounds in the tray, and then you press another button to record what that ammo type is. So that's with if you're a designer, you have to count the number of steps in that process. So it's a lot more technically complex, but it's not actually operationally more difficult to operate. It's just more complex.
So I mean, the TC still has the same hunter-killer system in his sight as a T-62. Operates on a very similar mechanical principle. He's got the same type of hatch design, more or less. I mean, it's not too far to say that a T-72 is simply a natural evolution of the T-55 from the user perspective.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of continuity in Soviet tech, and that's a lot of people have asked me to write a book on the T-64 or the T-80. I really struggle to see why I should and how I can do that, because there's a lot of continuity, which makes it difficult to, you know, it's difficult to explain what the difference is when they share so much in common. Like the the steering system in all three of those tanks, the T72, T64, T80, you steer it with tillers. You have the instrument panel on the left. You have the periscope. Like what? I, I don't know what to tell you. You know, that's how it is. And if you read a T72 book, you can basically you've got 80%, you know, of the content of this hypothetical T64 or T80 book right there. You know everything already. The only thing left to explain would be the engine and the suspension, and that's it, and maybe the fire control system. So there's a lot of continuity, and of course, from the user perspective, it's you can be retrained from a T55 to a T72, and you ride it home. Uh, no, I would not say that that's in an intentional operational aspect. Like the Soviets didn't want to upgrade technology so that, you know, the older tankers can migrate to the new tanks more easily. No, there's no evidence of that. It's just that that ended up being how it is. And it
Well, I
also
mean, it's no
happens
different.
that
It's the
a
same
lot
in
of
the
the
US.
time,
You get into an M60 and you can operate an M1. It's very similar. It's just the differences in the details. Um,
yeah, it's all in the details in the end. The reason why a lot of the things are functionally similar or even the same is that it's very easy sometimes to make a piece of equipment interchangeable or reverse compatible with an older tank. So it's not really necessary oftentimes to make the newer tank carry this exclusive equipment that the older tanks can't have. Quite often you can have, you know, you can standardize the whole tank fleet on a certain kind of sight, for example, or a certain kind of periscope. So there's really, why I struggle to explain it is because, well, it's natural. That's how it should be. That's how it always has been. It's like it seems kind of obvious, really, but you know that's how it was.
so there's questions in the chat there about fire control systems and improvements. Now, there have been so many variants of T72 over the last God knows how many years. You don't cover all of them in the book. So why did you select the ones that you actually did?
I'm sorry. What do you mean? Why I limited the number of variants to just the T72B?
Well, I think you did more than that. I mean, you got the T72M in there. I think the BV is the latest one that you have that's mentioned. 72, yeah, because you got Contact 5. But nowadays you got T72 version 2022 and so on. I mean, was it a case of you just had to call it quits somewhere, or you know? I mean,
Oh
it's a
yeah.
very detailed book on the T72, but it's not a detailed book on every T72, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. In the review for this book that Rolf Graz did for the Deutsches Panzermuseum, he says that this book is a book for the rivet counters, the screw counters, in the best possible way. I don't like to think of myself as a rivet counter. I don't like counting rivets. I don't like tracking the differences between variants. It really doesn't interest me at all. Um, so, you know, if you're looking to find out what the difference is between each individual year of the T72's production, I can't really help you. I don't know how to read the serial number on the front hull, the upper glacis. Yeah, I don't know how to read that. Um, why I ended at 1989, the T72B model 1989 or 1988. Well, that's just because Um, I'm I'm primarily a Cold War enthusiast, so I focus most of my energy into Cold War research. I really struggle to write anything, new and fresh on things that are more recent than the Cold War. That's basically it, just to limit the scope of the book.
Alright. Does your book explain how the gun-fired missile works?
Oh yeah, sorry. No. Uh, there's a very brief explanation um, attached to the section on the 1K13 site. But that's that's basically it. I don't explain how the guidance system works, and I also don't explain. Uh, I don't have a section on the missile itself. Um, so yeah, unfortunately, that's not in the book. That was omitted because of scope creep. So yeah, it had to be cut out.
Hmm. Okay, can you talk about the improvement in armor going from the fish gills to through contact 5? I mean, you spend, let's see, page 182 to page 200. You spend over 50 pages purely on protection. I mean, was there a trend, or was there a general overview, shall you say, or philosophy that comes across? I mean, I'm not going to ask you to go into every specification. I mean, that's what the book is for.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, guys, I have the book on my lap, so that's how I'm looking at the. Yeah. Um, that question is a bit broad, I guess. Um, could you be a bit more specific?
Okay, so you start off with the fishgill armor, and then it gets replaced by side skirts, and then there were two or three different variants of frontal armor. I think two types of hull armor and three types of turret armor. Was Do you know what the standards were that they were trying to up armor against, or was it simply a case of, well, we're always just trying to get the best possible?
Yeah. This The reference threat is explained in the book. They wanted to protect the tanks against 105 millimeter and so APDS and heat. That's it basically. The tank was initially designed to protect against APDS and heat, and then later on, as the 105 got a PFSDS, armor piercing fin stabilized discarding disable, that became the reference threat. Uh, that's basically it. Why I on protection? Well, it's not just about armor, right? It's about nuclear protection as well, and signature protection, or I should say signature reduction. Uh, so the survivability onion. Don't get seen. If you get seen, don't get hit. If you get hit, try to survive. That's a that's a really broad, that's a really broad set of goals to aim for. For the signature part, I go into optical camouflage. That's paint. Uh, uh, and there's also infrared camouflage, near infrared, because the Soviets were quite aware that everyone else had night vision equipment. It's not just them. So how do you make a tank less visible in the near infrared to those infrared spotlights? Well, you can make your tank paint, I should say, uh, more absorbent, less reflective of infrared. So you reflect less. Uh, so you're a bit darker than the background, but in general, it's better to be darker than brighter than the background. You know those
But
principles
Well, that's true.
and
You've
all.
got you've
Yeah,
got you've got a comparison shot, I think, of three different types of paint under infrared, and you can see the improvement in concealment depending on which type of paint you had applied. And in fairness, I don't think I've ever thought about it. When you think about usually the infrared spectrum as being are you showing up in thermal imagers, and it hadn't really occurred to me that there was different types of paint purely for the active infrared and passive infrared that was of the era.
Yeah. And it's also, it ties into a discussion of what your requirements are. In engineering, everything is about requirements. Everything. So in the US, in the 1960s, in the mid to late 1960s, they were standardizing on something that's called solar heat reflecting olive drab, and also desert tan, something like that. I'm not sure if it's called desert tan. It's just the khaki color. What they wanted with that was to reduce the internal heat of um, fire control cabins for missile systems. So you got this cabin, with attached to the director radar or the search radar. Uh, People are sitting inside under the sun in this, thin metal cabin. It gets really, really hot in there. And also for the missiles themselves, under the direct sunlight, it could get hot enough to actually damage the electronics to the point where they would literally just misfire. So they developed this paint to have a 60% infrared reflectance to reflect sunlight more efficiently, and in that way they can cool the temperatures. And it was really amazing for the cabin control cabins, because the temperature difference could be something like um, 40 plus degrees Celsius to 30 plus degrees Celsius. And that's the difference between becoming a heat casualty to being tolerable. And then they migrated that paint to tanks and other armored vehicles as well. Well, you can see the problem. Well, it does make the inside of the tank cooler by a few degrees, because the tank, the thicker armor absorbs a lot more heat. It's got a lot more thermal inertia. So it's a bit harder to get that level of improvement. There is an improvement. It's hard to get to the same level. And the side effect of that is you've got 60% infrared reflectance. So when someone with an IR spotlight, sweeps across the battlefield and hits your tank, you're gonna light up. Well, that's the requirement was for solar heat reflection, not infrared camouflage. So that's what you got. The Soviets wanted night camouflage, right? So that's, everything has its ramifications. You can't really avoid it. But then again, if you were to ask, so does that mean it's very hot inside Soviet tanks? Well, in the T-72, you got this liner, this anti-radiation liner. It's up to 2 inches thick in some places, and this liner is a pretty good insulator. So, like if you think of an insulator, you would think of foam, and foam is like 2 orders of magnitude less conductive than steel. Well, this anti-radiation liner isn't that good, but it's still 1 order of magnitude less conductive than steel. So you basically cover your tank in this insulation. So why do you have that liner? Well, they wanted to address the nuclear threat as well, right? So the US had a huge nuclear advantage over the USSR for the 1950s and for most of the 1960s. They were really scared of that, just being nuked by thousands of tactical bombs and strategic missiles and all that, and bombers, of course. So the tanks were covered in this anti-radiation material. So to cover the infrared threat, I have to go through what is infrared reflectance, heating of the crew compartment, and then from there, naturally, you have to go to why isn't it that hot inside the T-72? Well, it's because it's got this nuclear protection. Why does it have nuclear protection? Well, this, and that. So it's all interrelated, and that ends up in a chapter on protection that's over 100 pages, I think you said. Yeah, I mean it's about as much as I needed just to explain all of that, right?
All right. So you spend a little bit talking about microclimate regulation. Again, the screen is black for people because I'm reading for you a book right now. When you're talking about the positive pressure system of the MPC system, and then the little 20-watt personal fans. So yeah, it's like page 42, whatever, not too far down. Um, so I see. This gave some relief from heat stress, but the fans had a role in microclimate regulation. So what sort of microclimate do you get in a tank? And why do you need little fans to circulate the air right in front of you?
The microclimate in a tank is humidity from sweat and a lot of grime. So that's basically it. Tankers sweat a lot. All that sweat, it gets covered in dust, end up getting covered in paste, this dusty paste. And if you want to lose heat through your skin effectively, well, humans sweat, and that sweat has to evaporate. Well, if the interior of the tank is so humid, you can't cool down effectively. You have to move that air around. That's what the fans are doing. That's why sometimes the ventilation systems, they have ducts leading to each crew station. And of course, it just feels good to have air blowing in your face. That's basically it.
Speaking of air, something that I didn't realize was you mentioned again in the book the reason why the tank doesn't eject the stub case from a fired round until you load the next one is to seal the cannon for NBC, which I have to say I hadn't thought about, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, when I asked Stefan Koch about that, he said to me, we never really thought about that, which was kind of crazy because, if World War III erupted in Germany, someone would have to think up a good way to solve that problem. But as far as I could find, that really was the reason. It turns out that, when you fire a gun and the fume was it? No, it's not a fume extractor. It's a bore evacuator. That's what I use in the book. When the bore evacuator works, it it drags all those fumes out of the barrel. What happens when you drag those fumes out of the barrel is you also pull in a lot of air from the crew compartment. That's good because it means that you have this draft, pushing all the toxins out of the crew compartment. What it also means is that you lose your overpressure. So it doesn't matter if your tank has a this case ejection hatch in the back of the turret or not. If it opens, yeah, you will unseal your tank. But in practice, when you fire your gun, you've already unsealed your tank. Now, uh, when you eject that spent stub, that doesn't mean that you can pick up that stub and then put it into the gun to seal it again because, well, you've already unsealed your tank. It just means that you will have a stub in your tank before you get into that contaminated zone. So you take that stub, you put it into the breech, you close the breech, and you've sealed your tank. That's basically it.
Makes releases some of the pressure on the overpressure system. Let's see, what else have we got
Yeah,
in
yeah.
here? I mean, as I say, it's 500 pages of lots of ridiculous levels of information here. Like interior ballistics. What the hell is interior ballistics? Design your tank was to solve a parametric optimization problem. What the hell is a parametric? Page 284. Uh,
284.
uh,
It's a
achieve
fancy it's a
economic.
fancy term to say. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go
Go
ahead.
on.
Oh, a parametric optimization problem is just a fancy way of saying you fix a set of parameters and you optimize your solution according to that. That's it.
Mm. So the barrel life, you say, of a D81 is 425 to 450. Was that the barrel or was that the liner? Or would they or did the Soviets not separate the liner from the barrel when replacing them.
The
Page
gun doesn't have a
293.
liner.
No, it doesn't.
No, it's a monoblock. It's not a monoblock barrel, but it's because it has this cottage, this jacket, the chamber, that's to help it withstand the chamber pressure. There's no liner around the bore. There's no bore liner. You can't replace it. One piece. All tank guns are like that. All modern tank guns, for ancient artillery, you had liners, and for some relatively modern artillery, you still have liners.
Well, I
Not in
hate to
tank
tell you
guns.
this, the M1 certainly has a liner.
It does.
Yeah,
I mean,
so you
in the
can
bore.
replace the smoothbore liner. You replace the smoothbore liner before the cannon.
Do you mean the chrome lining?
I don't know what it's actually made of. I've never done a metallurgical analysis of the bloody thing.
Oh, no, it doesn't have a liner. I'm pretty sure about that.
Okay.
There's no tube inside the tube.
I mean, if I'm wrong, I'll be surprised, but I'm pretty damn sure there's a separate liner on it. Okay, let's see what else we got. Propellant powders. You got 1, 2, 3. What the hell is this? High nitrogen nitrous cellulose. I mean, you've put 8 pages just on the propellant. That's going to a level of detail here.
Yeah. There's also a really nice photo on page 312. It's all in service of explaining why the tank gun is the way it is. So if you're used to talking about artillery, you would hear people saying, this 155 millimeter gun has a barrel length of L52. This one has a barrel length of L60. Oh, but this one has a chamber capacity of 20 liters. The other only has a chamber capacity of 10 liters. So what does that mean? Why do you need a big chamber capacity? Is a big chamber capacity always good? And why you want to ask that is because, well, that is directly tied to how big the ammunition is, the charges, like the size that they are, right? How many you can fit in the tank. It's all interrelated. So if you've got a big chamber capacity, you've got a bigger gun, you've got bigger ammo, you can carry less of it. And it's not just that. Why you need that big chamber capacity is because the propellant is basically the second most basic kind of smokeless propellant there is. So smokeless propellant is nitrocellulose, and high nitrogen nitrocellulose is more powerful nitrocellulose, basically, in as few words as possible. And when you're using this kind of propellant, you need a lot of it to get the muzzle energy that you need. Why doesn't the 120 millimeter Rheinmetall gun or the Abrams's M256 gun have a chamber capacity nearly as large as the D81? Is because they use a more modern propellant. So it seems weird, I guess, to talk so much about the propellant, but really it makes a lot of difference. It's really how the gun was designed. It's the limiting factor. I guess you could say that it's the limiting factor to why the tank gun was designed the way it was.
One of the other things you have in there is talking about the counterweight. So obviously the gun it's a small turret, so the gun sticks out way long. There's a lot of metal on the outside of the tank. There's not so much metal on the inside of the tank, so they had to come up with some creative solutions to balance as best as they could. Because I note that they were saying they had a difficulty with manual controls. Balance as best as they could the tank gun in such a small length.
Yeah, and that ties into So that's a recurring theme. I'm sure you've noticed. Everything ties into something else. With the gun, to explain how counterbalancing the gun works, you have to look at the way the gun is mounted. So, you look at a T-72 and you look at a Leopard 2, for example. The first thing you'll notice if you look at the turret is the Leopard 2 has a big gun mantlet. The T-72 doesn't. Okay, so naturally you would think protection. But it's not just about protection. It's the fact that if you have a big gun mantlet with a lot of armor, you've got a lot of weight in front of the trunnions, and you have to balance it somehow. With the D-81, the Soviets decided in the early 50s, I guess, or the late 1940s, they didn't want to deal with that. So, and they also decided that having a smaller gun mantlet, which is less likely to be hit, is more profitable in terms of avoiding firepower kills. So even if a shot doesn't penetrate the gun mantlet, the energy delivered into that piece of metal is often enough to just shear the trunnion pins. Not clean off often, but enough that the elevation is jammed. So it's just better to have this much smaller target so you don't get hit in the first place. And the side effect of that is that you don't have so much armor hanging off the front of your gun. So you can make the inside of your gun shorter. And if you can make the inside of your gun shorter, it can take up less space. So you can fit a bigger gun in a smaller turret. So that's three, I guess. Three factors roll into one. And so it's a bit difficult to explain all that without using quite a lot of text.
Yeah. I think it also said that they installed the stabilization system as part of the counterweight system. Was I wrong in that? Or did I misread that? It's possible.
Yeah, that's one of the big features, I would say. It's not exclusive to the T-72. It actually started on the T-54. Could be earlier, but T-54 is the one that I know for sure that's how they did it. So when you stick the stabilizer, or not every part of the stabilizer, just give the important bits for the vertical gun stabilizer. When you stick it under the breech, it contributes to the counterweight, right? Like on a turret basket or on a turret wall, it's not doing anything. It's just bringing the turret down. If you put it on the gun, it's a counterweight. That's efficiency.
Yeah. I'm just scrolling around again, lads. That's what the black is. You got like 3 pages on wheel design, even before you get to the track. Um,
Yeah. Believe it or not, there's a lot of controversy about suspensions because there's this weird internet rivalry between T-64 fans and T-72 fans.
is there?
Yeah, it's like the drama is so intense that it's to the point of coming to blows quite often in the forums.
I'm missing this.
And
Which forum is this? I need to drop by.
the Russian forums,
Oh, okay.
Podvaga 2004. Yeah,
Okay, the Russian forum. I'm not going to drop by.
yeah. It has spilled over a bit into the English sphere. Not so much, I guess, but it's there. So people would debate the T-64 road wheel better or the T-72 road wheel. To objectively analyze the merits of each design, well, again, I have to spend quite a lot of text, quite a lot of diagrams to explain what exactly happens when you make a road wheel larger in diameter versus smaller diameter, right? Or why the T-72 suspension is the way it is because it inherited quite a lot from the T-54 suspension. So the design principles are basically the same. It's a direct, it's a very direct link. The T-64 was a conscious abandonment of older design principles. Why why is it so controversial? Well, well, I'm not sure if you're interested in hearing. It's a bit of a long story, so yeah, I guess it's, I guess we can skip that.
But it seems to me that the T-64 fans on the Russian forum are going to lose because somebody just has to say, well, why has no other tank, including any other Russian tank, used the small T-64 road wheels ever since? You would have thought if it was that great, the T-80 would have had them.
Yeah.
Do you speak Russian, or are you just using a lot of Google Translate?
Uh, your first question first. With suspension design, it's a very, very complex topic. I don't think I've done it enough justice in the book. It's like just enough to get an idea of how the T72 suspension is designed. Basically, the optimal suspension is again a parametric optimization, issue. A tank is supposed to be a high-speed tracked vehicle. A high-speed tracked vehicle that can move very quickly over rough terrain. Um, you can isolate a few parameters and then optimize around those. What you end up with is basically every tank's suspension nowadays. Everything, everything from IVs or tanks, all of them, they have this uh, generic look, I guess. The T72 looks unique because of how big its road wheels are. Every modern tank looks generic because that's the way you should do it. You should have these medium diameter wheels. You should have a lot of ground clearance. You should have these long swing arms, and not the T72's big road wheels and short swing arms. So, in the book, I'm not arguing that the T72 suspension is better. I'm just explaining why it is the way it is and the technology behind it, the principles behind it. Uh, I'm not really trying to bust myths or, contribute to an argument. It's kind of a lost cause because it's not really, it's not, the solution isn't one versus the other. The solution is what everyone else is doing, what the T80 is doing. That's the optimal solution for high speed on off-road terrain, right? So yeah, this topic I had to navigate a bit more carefully to not advocate for one over the other. But well, when you read it, you'll know, I guess. Yeah. As to whether I speak Russian, no, I don't, because I have no one to speak it to. But I can read it. Uh, the thing is that after researching tanks, Russian tanks, Soviet tanks, for a decade by now, I've my brain has learned to associate words with meanings. So I can't speak it because I have no practice. But if you write something to me, more often than not, I will understand it. Yeah.
Just a quick note, two notes here from Failcard. He's confirming that NATO tank guns do have a chrome barrel liner. Wen Jian Chung's book, whatever, he says that the T-64 road wheels had a higher life expectancy than T-72. I don't know. Well, I can't comment on that. So something else that's a little bit unusual about the T-72 compared to other tanks is the steering and transmission system with basically two gearboxes or two drivetrains, one for each wheel. Is there any indication as to why they made such a relatively unusual decision?
All right. To answer fail card
Yeah.
first. Uh, I'm not sure what the exact number is. I would not be surprised one way or the other. But with the T72's wheels, the one of the things that you'll notice right away when you walk right up to a T72 is that they're very wide. They're like if you took off the tracks, you could drive the tank on wheels, and the ground pressure wouldn't be horrible. They're really wide. What happens when you have very wide tracks is when your track goes over terrain, and let's say the inner end rides over a rock, the track will flex. It's got a finite amount of rigidity. It will flex, and it will deflect. And the wheel, which is rigidly attached to the axle, it has nowhere to go but straight up. And what happens is the inner side of that road wheel is carrying all of that weight on just that corner with the track that is touching with the track. The outer side is no longer in contact with the track. So when you drive off-road for a long time, it turns out the inner side of the road wheels gets chunked a lot. The rubber chunks off. And when your rubber is chunked off enough, your wheel gets written off, or you have to replace the inner wheel. And by the way, that's what happens on every tank, more or less. The T64 is unique because it has steel rims, and the rims are very narrow, like a train. It runs on the very center of the track, so it's a bit less susceptible to that problem. But whether I can say definitively one is better than the other in terms of life expectancy, I don't have the data, so I can't say.
Fair.
Now, for your question, Nick, the transmission design, that design is for maximum mass volume optimization. Have the smallest possible amount of volume, the maximum engine power and capability. So in the T64, which is where the T72 got its transmission from, in the T64, you have this opposed piston engine that's lying flat, and its shaft is connected to the transmission on both ends of the engine. So the engine is nested between the transmission, basically. The engine is narrow enough for that to work. In the T72, it isn't. So it seems a bit weird, I guess, when you look at a T72 and you see those two side gearboxes, and you think, why did they do it that way? You have all this space in the middle. Well, in the T64, they put the engine in that space, and that's basically it.
All right, we'll be going most of an hour. Lads, if you've got any other questions, type them in now because we're running out of time. I got to get up in the morning. I'm sure other things happen as well. A couple of pages of machine gun, suspended cooling system. You got what? 5 pages on the cooling system, 4 pages in. No more than that. You got 20. Like 18 pages on the engine. 9 pages on drivetrain design. What's overall, I guess from your perspective, I mean, I've always thought the T72 is very underrated design. People look at it and say, oh, M1 Abrams came along and they obliterated the T72 with no problem at all. And I'm going, well, Jesus, they're shooting at a tank that's 20 years older than them. If they aren't winning, we'd be wondering where our tax dollars went. But for its era, I've always thought it's been a very underrated design. So, are you in more or less agreement with that statement?
Absolutely. It was, for a few years, the best tank in the world.
Okay, question here. Why was there no emphasis on a high reverse speed? What is a fair point? Is attacking tank is supposed to drive forward towards enemy. No reverse. You will be shot if you go in reverse. Yeah, that's my opinion.
Yeah. Commissars are manning this T12 anti-tank gun behind the lines, and they'll shoot any tank that reverses.
Seriously, was there any particular reason for that, or is it just they ran out of room for gearing? They just wanted a really, really good ratio for reverse.
It's a combination of factors. Number one, again, engineering is about requirements. There was no requirement for high reverse. That's reason number one. And everything else follows. Why there was no requirement? Well, because If there was no requirement, you can get away with a smaller transmission, basically. Because I think I explore in the book, there's an optimal number of gears if you have a certain number of degrees of freedom in your planetary gear train. So in a planetary gear, you have 2 degrees of freedom. If you stack planetary gears end to end to make a compound planetary gear, you have so and so degrees of freedom. With the design on the T72 BKP side gearboxes, you can't get any more gears than what it has. You can't put a second reverse gear in it. You can't do it without massively affecting the rest of the gear. What's it called? The gear speed range, and the specific ratios and all that. So if there's no requirement, you can do that. That's basically it. It's not really that they specifically wanted a high gear ratio to reverse out of obstacles. It's just that when you have a reverse gear, that's what it must do. So if you got tanks that can, go fast in reverse with 2 gears or more, even the first gear does that. And also you've got the torque converter in a lot of modern tanks. So yeah. So if you have a reverse gear, it has to give a high gear reduction. It has to. Like in the Sherman, it's the same.
Yeah,
4
3 miles
kilometers
an
per
hour, 4
hour, I
miles
think.
an hour. Yeah, which is still faster than the T72.
No,
But
it's not miles per hour. It's kilometers per hour. Same speed. It's the same in British tanks, I think. Churchill, Cromwell, Comet, 3 kilometers per hour. So it's if you have a reverse gear, it has to be able to get you out of a situation, and that's it.
So why did the T72's fire control system not have the same capability as that on T64? So it wouldn't apply lead, for example, on its own.
The main factor is industry. In the Soviet tank building industry, there's only so much to go around, and the tank builder is only responsible for the tank's powertrain and suspension, and basically they're interested in making the vehicle part of the tank, the part that the crew drives and the part that runs. Everything else is supplied by contractors. The gun was designed by the gun factory. The sights were designed by the sights factory. There weren't enough sights to equip everyone with the same advanced fire control system. That's really the fundamental reason. Like you could put the same sight from the T64B to a T72, no problem. It can fit. There just aren't enough to go around. So when people say the T64 is better than the T72 because it's got a better fire control system, it's kind of missing the point. The point is, these tanks both served in the Soviet Army. It's not a rivalry. They're working together, right? I mean, that's how it is in a lot of places as well. Yeah, a lot of countries, I should say. You often just can't give everyone what you would prefer them to have. Like preferably the M1 Abrams should have gotten the CITV, this panoramic thermal imaging sight. Should have gotten it in the M1A1. They delayed that to the M1A2. Sometimes you just can't in production.
Okay, an opinion. Okay, yeah, you're right. An opinion question here. So, if the T72 is designed to meet parameters such as no need for reverse speed, in your opinion, with the benefit of hindsight, which of these parameters were correct and which were not?
Is it the comment by Sean Brennan about requirements?
Yes.
Okay. it's a very good way of framing the issue. Uh, Essentially, the T72 is the way it is because the requirements of the time dictated that it be so. That doesn't sound very meaningful, but that's really the gist of it. It was designed to survive in a nuclear war. That's why it has nuclear protection. It was designed to survive 105 millimeter gunfire. That's why it's got that kind of composite armor. It was designed to kill M60s. That's why it has that gun. It was designed to hit 60 kilometers per hour top speed. So it's got 7 gears. But why it has 7 gears and not fewer gears? Because you can reach the same top speed with fewer gears. It would just take longer. Well, that's because they wanted to have enough gears so you can have number one, efficient fuel mileage in marching conditions and when going off road, because usually tanks don't go at 60 kilometers per hour routinely. They most often go 25 kilometers per hour, 30, 35. And when you're cruising at that speed, it would be best if you could select a gear and then keep it there. And the engine would be most fuel efficient at that gear. If you go a bit slower, then the engine is running quite fast to keep up. If you go a bit slower, wait, what was it? No. If you're in the lower gear and you have to go that same speed, the engine will have to be running faster, which is fuel inefficient. So you have to gear up. Well, when you have to cover this range of, let's say 10 kilometers per hour to 30, 40 kilometers per hour, you need to give 4 or 5 gears, and well, you end up with 7 gears in total. If you want to reach that top speed that's mandated in the specifications, 60 kilometers per hour, and you want your tank to be fuel efficient, and you want it to accelerate well, you can't really avoid that many gears. I guess you could with a torque converter, but the Soviets didn't invest in that technology. But that has its ups and downs as well. So there's a really, really big can of worms to discuss. But basically, the root of your question is, why don't they just remove the 7th speed and give it a second reverse gear? Well, it's a bit absurd to have a tank that's going in 5th gear all the way up to, let's say, 50 kilometers per hour, and then shifts into 6th to get to 60. Because what happens is you ruin the rest of, you ruin gears 2 to 5, just, for the sake of that second reverse gear. So it's not that simple. I don't pretend to be much of a gearbox designer, but that's a recurring theme. Everything is interlinked. You can't really get away with it that easily. Sorry to say.
I mean, I agree with that. I think it's a bit of an impossible question because I can't think of any parameters that are put out by intelligent people. Usually, tank designers are intelligent people, or the doctrinaires telling the tank designers who are intelligent people, this parameter is wrong because of the way it's designed to fit in the overall scheme of things. Where the idea fails is if you get some arbitrary decisions like Adolf Hitler saying, yeah, I want 8 centimeters of armor on Panther and not 6, when all the doctrinaires and the designers are going, we only need 6. So then the entire tank falls apart as a result. The T72 autoloader, we kind of discussed that a little bit earlier. It's a volumetric thing, but the T64. And as far as loading the next round, I mean, if you when you push the reload button, if you haven't changed the ammo selector, it will load the same type of round that you had just fired. So I'm not sure I understand the question. Fail card, the T72. Yeah, again, it goes into the smoke system. There's like several pages on the smoke system in the book, but it is an offensive smoke system, which is something I didn't entirely understand myself for a long while. The gunner runs the smoke system because he's basically firing it as a weapon to allow the T-72 to get closer. And let's see how many pages you have on the smoke system in here. Day sight, night sight, protection. No?
Well, nowadays we're used um, to an idea that was started in 1973. That's the Sager drill. You pop smoke, you maneuver, you get out of the way, right? Um, T-72 smoke system is more like a World War II smoke mortar, like on the Matilda or um, British Sherman tanks. I think you have this mortar. You can shoot smoke bombs. What you do with that is you shoot it towards the enemy, 200 or so meters away, sometimes closer. That will screen your advance. You will screen your accompanying infantry, and then you advance under the cover of smoke.
Well, I'm going to
That's the
correct you
purpose.
on that one, I'm afraid. So I found just last week, I haven't put it up, a document that said that the reason that the US had the smoke launchers removed from future tanks was because all it did when they were firing them in a defensive purpose was it just attracted attention, going, hey, the tank's over here, you got like 20 seconds to shoot me before I get covered. So, as a defensive mechanism, it was actually worse than having no smoke at all.
You mean World War II tanks?
Yes, the 2-inch smoke bomb thrower on the
Oh
Sherman.
yeah, I was talking about screening in advance.
Right, but
Uh, Defensive
that's
smoke
not what
grenade.
the 2-inch bomb thrower was really for. At least not in the U.S. anyway. Maybe other countries use it
Ah,
differently, but the U.S. was a defensive system. It's actually another thing I'm
right.
going to put up on the Twitter page in a little bit, but no matter. Anyway, da, da, da. Actually, I don't remember you writing very much about the snorkel in here. Did you?
If you're counting pages, I think there's one page. Yeah, it
Oh, there it is.
it,
Water
it doesn't
obstacles.
need
Okay,
that much
you got a water
explaining.
obstacle. Yeah, you got a lovely picture
The
of
snorkel is cute.
the command tank with the antenna sticking way the hell up. The
Mm.
so I mean, you read books. Oh yeah, we aim for the command tank. Well, how the hell do you identify the command tank? Today, it's pretty hard to identify a command tank. But looking at that picture of the radio antenna on the T72 you have on there, what is it, the 130? Yeah, on page 79. T72K with deployed mast antenna. I mean, this antenna is so big it has guy ropes holding it up.
Yeah, uh, it's yeah. That's how it's supposed to be when let's say the regiment commander has to set up an impromptu command post. That's what the radio is. That's what the mast antenna is for. It doesn't move like that on the battlefield, with this big antenna sticking out. No,
Yeah,
you have to get out of the tank and set it up.
yeah,
Yeah.
it'll take a while. I'm sure the helicopters would love to see it though. Um,
Oh yeah. And they have to be in a clear area, so like a forest clearing in the open, so you can get good reception. So yeah, it's not the best place to be sitting.
so, as you were writing this book, what was writing or researching? What was the biggest surprise to you?
Biggest surprise. Mm, you mean about the tank or about the process?
That's actually a good question, and opened up yourself, so we'll answer it for both.
Um, for the tank, there are a lot of little surprises, very very minor ones, like the sort that you'd go like, oh, then you go on. There wasn't any big surprise that I didn't already know. Because again, I've been writing since 2014. I've been constantly updating my uh, internal library, so to speak. So there wasn't any big shock, like epiphany, like, oh, so that's why that's the way it is. Uh, but when you go into detail on tanks, you will quite often be surprised at the little things. And of course, with little things, you can't really get big surprises. about the process itself, the big surprise was how difficult it is to actually write a book. It's not a blog post. You have to actually put effort into making sure you're putting out something of quality. Um, yeah, it took quite a lot of time to get it right. Even though I've already written an article on the T72 in my blog, it's it's not usable as a book. I couldn't transplant it into paper. It just doesn't work. I had to write the whole thing from scratch. Uh, so if you've read my blog, thanks for being a faithful reader. But this book is nothing like the blog. It's a totally different thing. Yeah, that's what I would say. Yeah.
All right. Anything else you want to put out before we close up, other than where to buy the thing? But so you buy it on militaryhistorygroup.com. I think it's the only place you can buy it. But anything else you want to
Yeah.
put out about either the tank or just in general?
Yeah. Before I close, I like to say the book is currently on sale for 20% off on lulupress.com. You can look for it under T72, the definitive guide to the Soviet workforce, or you can look for it under the publisher, Military History Group. The sale is going from 13th September until the 27th. So, yeah, you've still got time if you want to go for that. The book is also available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. I am not sure if it's available in other major bookstores, uh, but feel free to search for whichever option gives you the best deal and the best delivery option. But if you want that deal, go to lulupress.com. Uh, to close,
Actually,
well,
just before you do, so Alt does have a question about the munition powder. I don't know if you see it there about the nitrocellulose powder.
grain size. No, no, it's not about grain size. Grain size affects the burning rate, not the energy of the powder. The big, like, when you're talking about physics, basically you can't get away from the fact that energy is energy. Nitrocellulose powder doesn't give the energy that you need uh, unless you have a lot of it. That's basically it.
Okay. Okay. That's that answered. So you're too close.
To close, um, I don't really have anything to close, but I would just like to say, yeah, I have, you know, this isn't a grievance, but it's something I've noticed a lot in the tank enthusiast community. Uh, the main thing when you're researching tanks or anything in life is the attitude by which you go about it. If you go about it with an open mind, and not so open that your brain falls out, but with an open mind, you will probably reach the answer more easily. The way that uh, content is presented on YouTube and in books, and any media, is the presenter has a narrative, uh, a guiding theme to more effectively convey a story to you. So you can be entertained and you can learn. It's edutainment. But don't be don't be excessively caught up in the way that presenters present things, because quite often these topics are a lot more complicated than they're presented to be. Like, for example, why does the T-34 have sloped sides, for example? Well, the way that some people say it is because they wanted more armor at the expense of volume, which makes sense. You think about the Sherman's sponsons. They're huge, they're flat, they're very tall, they're very voluminous. Why it had those sponsons, though, is because the turret basket is inside the sponsons. The fighting compartment of the Sherman is above the tracks. It's a lot like the M3 Lee, right? Not Grant, Lee. Like, the whole crew compartment is above the tracks. In the T-34 and in most tanks, I should say, it's not. the crew's legs are below the track line. So in the T-34, when you trace the chronology, you look at tanks like the Panzer III and the T-26 even, derived from the Vickers 6-ton, and nonsense. You have stuff stowed on top of the Pioneers, on top of the tracks, but there are no sponsons. So in the T-34, what you actually have is a tank that should have straight sides, and then it had its internal volume expanded by having sponsons. There are small sponsons, they're sloped, they're not that big, but the internal volume increased. It did not decrease. So when a presenter, presents the issue, he only has one sentence or two to convey that idea. He can't explain everything to you in one video. So, don't get too caught up in the way that presenters have to, present their content. Really, the topic is more often than not a lot more nuanced. That's how this book ended up with 490 pages, because there's a lot to talk about in tank design. When you talk about the gun, you have to talk about the propellant. It's unavoidable. And when you talk about the driver, like, you have to talk about the steering levers. Why does it have steering levers? Because of the transmission. Everything is interlinked. You can't avoid talking about one thing when you talk about something. And so I would encourage everyone to, be more detail oriented. And of course, when you have that attitude, you would be well served if you buy my book and read through it. There's a lot to learn in it. I hope it's an enjoyable read also, and I hope it's informative. Thank you very much.
Oh, good. All right. Well, those of you that hung around through the video issues, greatly appreciated. When this thing finishes getting processed by YouTube, I'm gonna edit out the top the first 10 minutes, and hopefully it'll be better for a rewatch if you came along late. All right, Ryan. I am gonna head off and go to bed because the kid gets up at 6 in the morning because schools around here are stupid, and I guess you can go and enjoy your national holiday. What is a national holiday there anyway?
I don't remember. I, I'll have to Google it.
It's Monday where he is, but he's not working for whatever holiday it is.
It's a national holiday that's related to Eid ul Mawlid, birth of the holy. It's related to Islam. It's a religious holiday. There's also it's also National Day here, so it's actually two holidays overlapping into one day. Yeah.
All right, there you go. Well, whatever you do to celebrate, go enjoy.
Thanks very much.
All right, take care, so.
Thanks. Take care, and thanks everyone for watching.